So, happy birthday, Wen. My sister's birthday today.
Happy birthday.
I will call her later. I've got to make the call. You know how you got to make the call on the birthdays.
I'm assuming she's younger than you.
Yes. She's 6 years younger than me, and has 4 children. So she's two children better than me. But I've watched many a hockey game with my sister, so she's an excellent big-time hockey fan, and I will call you later, even though I hate the whole concept of having to call people and even getting calls on my birthday, which I know probably sounds terrible, but there's certain things in society that I don't like.
No, you know what? I've been like this for a while. I honestly, it's nice for people on Facebook who are friends of mine to say happy birthday when they get the reminder. But I don't really want parties. I really don't want my birthday acknowledged. It's not that big of a deal for me. And when people make it a really big deal, I just
want to party. I don't mind acknowledgments. That's fine because I acknowledge other people. Right. I don't want to party. But I will say this, Zach. If your sister's a big Flyers fan, my Flyers picture book comes out in January.
You got it. That'll be. She would love that. Sure, she would. That's definitely a good endorsement for anyone involved in things like that. I know. So there's the only thing I hate more, and I don't know if I've ever gone on this rant before, but I will for a second here. I am an absolute person who loathes the concept of thank you notes. All right, I think that thank you notes are the most ridiculous thing in the world, and because when I give a gift, I never once expect a thank you note, and when I get it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool that they thank me, but usually I only give gifts to people that I would see on a normal basis who would say, hey, I love the gift, thanks. They would just, when they see me. But, when I get a thank you note, what I've taken to doing is writing a thank you note back to people, thanking them for the thank you note. And I have done this a couple times now, and it's just like, I can't tell you how much I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time you took to thank me for a gift that I gave you. Just like, and it's just to see if they'll respond. A couple people have actually responded a couple times. We've gone back and forth like 5 times with people.
It's a passive-aggressive thank you note.
It's a very passive-aggressive thank you note, and I absolutely, because, there are sometimes you have to thank people. Well, if you have a wedding maybe and you get a bunch, that's fine, I get it. But anyway, I'll stop there. But I can't stand the concept, and it sounds like I'm a thankless person. I'm not, and I'm a giving person. I give gifts all the time to people.
Well, clearly you're not a thankless person because you write thank yous for thank you notes, so that's not...
I do. I just think that's absolutely ridiculous.
It starts a never-ending cycle. It's like, no, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank... it never stops.
I don't give a gift to be thanked, and I feel as if, me giving a gift gives me some kind of moral superiority over you, and now when you thank me, now I've lost that.
I can only speak for myself. Giving a gift makes me feel good.
Right.
Something to somebody. I'm showing that I genuinely care about them.
Exactly. And that means that and that's all the thanks I need. The fact that I know that you're enjoying whatever it is I got you, and I don't need to even know that. You don't have to tell me how much you enjoyed it. I'm assuming you're enjoying it. And if you're not enjoying it, that's fine too.
Let's say, for argument's sake, you gave me like a $1,000 gift today, and then tomorrow I was on like a beach in Jamaica and I tweeted a picture for you and said thanks.
That would be cool. That's cool. That's fine.
All right.
But just don't send me a note with a note that has like blank spaces and says, "I'd really like to thank you for," and underline the $1,000 gift. Okay. It was really appreciated, and I enjoyed it very much on the beach. that to me, I don't need that.
Well, I'll give you one, and we'll get talking hockey here in a second. But I know there's another thing that I think is completely useless. Although people who do interviews and stuff like that seem to want them, is cover letters to resumes. What is the point? The resume tells you the experience of the person. What the hell do you need a couple paragraphs of a cover letter to tell them? What, you need to know even more?
I want you to grovel a little bit. It's for groveling's sake.
No, I'm a
groveling.
Sorry.
That's awesome. I like that. That's a good one. That's a very good one. All right, let's begin. The thankless group we are.
We are.
Such a thankless group. It's Thursday, August 27th. Happy birthday, Wendy. All right. I will call you later, though, because if I don't call you...
Your mother will say something.
My mother already texted me, reminding me that it was my sister's birthday. I know it's my sister's birthday. I've been talking about it all week. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Thursday, August 27th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock somewhere, Eastern, or somewhere it's 1 o'clock. Right now it's in the Central Time, or the Mountain Time Zone. We just wanted the people in Colorado to see what it was like if the show came to them at 1 o'clock and see what they thought.
There you go.
Here we go. Thank you, Mike. Very much appreciate it. All right, so we were talking about thank you notes and protests before the game, and someone sent me a really funny article, which I think is hilarious. That do you know the rule icing? Okay, the icing rule was instigated. When do you think the icing rule came into effect? The first icing, the year.
1940.
For a little bit, you're close. Mike, you want to take a guess?
1946.
Okay, 1931. All right. So there were two early decade incidents. This is in reading from the article in particular that prompted the NHL to introduce rules concerning icing. The first occurred on November 8th, 1931, in a game between the New York Americans and the Boston Bruins. The Americans were holding a slim 3-2 lead when they began sending the puck down the ice every opportunity. In total, the American iced more than 50 times. Can you imagine that? The fans of the Boston Garden became so incensed at this boring maneuver that they littered the ice with paper, rubbish, and broken bottles. The referee ordered the team to their dressing room, but the crowd quieted down, and the game was resumed without incident. So,
and what few people know is that the New York Americans were coached by Guy Boucher.
Right.
Oh, wow.
There you go. So the Boston president at the time was Charlie Adams, and he was so upset by the Americans' choice of playing style that he ordered his Bruins to play the same way when the teams met again in New York on December 3rd. The result was a scoreless draw that saw the Bruins ice the puck 87 times, disgusting the 14,000 fans in attendance. The media charged that the Bruins had made a mockery of the game and its rules. And NHL Frank Calder said that he had watched the game and had seen worse. I don't know. The media didn't press him as to exactly what he meant. Anyway, so I was wrong. On June 15th, 1951, the NHL declared that if a goaltender came out of his net and touched the puck, icing would be nullified. Okay, so wait a second. So I'm trying to figure out. I guess, yeah, so then it was put in, and then in 1951, they brought in the rule that a goaltender would nullify the icing of a puck. So, yeah, so there's icing. And then, of course, the next big news in icing came 2 years ago. Now, I guess 2 years ago now? Wow. With the, that you don't have to race the puck. It's funny how that has completely been fine. Remember all the complaints about that? How people were completely just like, the race to the puck is such a great thing. And
well, it gave you a little extra whatever, but the risk of injury was too great for that little shot sideshow, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what's funny, though, to me, that we've yet to see a really controversial, and to me, this rule was so kind of vague, because it is a hard rule to call by the linesmen sometimes, because the way they're skating with the play as it's coming back. Two players are skating ahead of them probably. Yeah, we really haven't seen them mess up many.
Yeah, they're using common sense because they're sort of like looking and blowing it in anticipation, like, look, this guy's 2 steps behind him, there's no chance of him catching him, and they blow it earlier now. And so I think that's probably why. Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised because I expected this kind of a rule to have more problems with it, but it hasn't been the case, I mean, so that's my little tidbit for the show this morning. I thought instead of talking about Gomez the entire time, I would discuss. Let's talk about Scotty Gomez, because Scotty Gomez has now agreed to a tryout with the St. Louis Blues.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, many are noting that this is probably due to his connection with Marty Brodeur, but Gomez, man, here's a player that just won't stop his career. I mean, he's been through so many. I mean, he's got 9 lives, Scotty Gomez.
Well,
yeah, but the last 3 or 4 aren't very good.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I didn't watch the Devils exclusively last year, but in the games that I saw him play, he wasn't playing badly, and I had heard from people who have watched the Devils regularly that he actually played pretty decently. So, I mean, the thing is, I mean, I'm sure you're correct, Dak, in the fact that Marty Brodeur had something to do with this, but
yeah.
In light of the news that came out this morning regarding Patrick Berglund, who has a shoulder injury and could be out up to 4 months, I think that increases the possibility of Gomez actually earning a professional contract and getting signed because, not that Gomez can play the wing, he's mostly a center, but they have so much flexibility in terms of moving players to the wing that I think they could do that, or it provides a little insurance. So I think it's very possible he's going to make it.
Wasn't it just 2 years ago we were on the Gomez watch, like when will he score his first goal? And
Yeah.
his embarrassing year. Now, last year, the only reason he had 34 points, and he was a -10, let's not forget that. The only reason is because he was on such a bad team they could afford to give him the ice time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. I'm telling you, St. Louis will not be able to give him that much ice time. And as a result, he is just going to be like another guy. And, I would rather, again, unfortunately, Ken Hitchcock would rather have veterans. Me, I would rather bring in a youngster in that spot. When you have guys that broke in like Jaden Schwartz, this is an opportunity to break in another instead of using a retread.
Well, it's a question of whether they want to put Scott Gomez on the fourth line or bring up a guy like a Ty Ratty or a Barbashev or a Fabry and not give them the ice time. I don't think they really have room for a youngster who if it means playing him 5 minutes a night, it doesn't do any benefit for them. I think that's the reason he's there is because we know what Gomez is. He can play 5 or 6 minutes a night. Maybe he won't be very effective, but it's more beneficial to their long-term goals if they keep their kids down in the AHL rather than have them sitting on the bench or sitting in the press box with St. Louis.
You know what, though? But here's two things. First thing is, Gomez is not a fourth-line guy. He's just not.
Right.
Never played a gritty moment in the NHL. He really hasn't. Mm-hmm. So to even put him in that role is crazy, and to not give Barbashev a chance to make the team is crazy because he could be one of the great talents that's not even playing in the NHL. I mean, yes, I understand he's 19, but you know what? This kid is built like a truck. He's got tons of moves. I know Hitchcock's going to want him to play a lot of defense. He does play defense. Is he going to play it perfectly in his first year? No. But it's a perfect opportunity to work a guy like him in, and he would be the guy I would look at instead of bringing in, somebody older and just that's not going to really give you anything.
Well, yeah. I mean, I will grant you your point is correct regarding him not being a gritty player. But as we've talked about, there seems to be a conversion now to fourth lines being, having some skill and being able to match up against other teams' fourth lines and taking advantage of that. And I think, Gomez doesn't have the wheels that he had back in his heyday, but he still has the skill to be able to set up plays and score the occasional goal. So I just think that they're looking at this. If he's got a realistic view of making the team, it's going to be as a third or fourth line guy, more than likely a fourth line guy, and giving the kids more chance to develop down in the minors and not activating their entry-level deals. And that might be what they're if it is between, say, him and Barbashev, maybe they don't want to activate Barbashev's entry-level deal this year. Maybe they want to elongate it a little bit and have him start next year.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, one of the interesting things about Gomez is that he's kind of a polarizing player. Like I've talked to people who said that Gomez is a great guy and all that stuff. But then there's also players who think he's a selfish guy, a selfish player, who and they played with him. And I remember when he was an All-Star in New York that one year, there was a lot of people around the Rangers that didn't think he should be because he was one of those guys who just really played for himself. And yet, I mean, obviously a great story, the guy from Alaska and all this stuff, and he's got all this history. But I've definitely heard mixed opinions on him, and for a guy like that to sort of make it to so many teams, still keep going is a credit to something. I mean, he definitely still has the ability to hang on. I mean,
yeah, I think he's played well with others lately. I do.
Yeah, I think that's probably has changed
since his skills have diminished. I do. But again, I just look at the St. Louis Blues and say, do you want a shot in the arm, an infusion of youth, something that could, you basically made some trades to try and shake things up. Bringing in Scott Gomez is not going to shake anything up. And just because he's got rings doesn't mean he is going to be like a Trevor Linden, Mark Messier type coming in. He's not that guy.
No, he's not. He doesn't seem like he's even a Hitchcock type player to me.
No, he doesn't. And that's where I say, you know what? Go into camp with a spot up for grabs and watch what somebody young could do to grab that spot, because I think that's what the Blues need. I think otherwise they're in this perpetual role of, yes, we're a veteran team, we're playing veterans, and then you're going to lose with veterans. You know, I mean, we've seen.
Well, I mean,
look what Gaudreau did for Calgary last year. I mean, just you never know. We bring in, you tell me, hey, you can't bring in Barbashev because he's only going to have fourth line minutes. Well, what if I bring in Barbashev and he's better than my second or third line guys?
right. Well, yeah, but I'm just saying. I mean, you can see by some of the other moves that St. Louis made during the offseason. I mean, they added a guy like Andre Benoit on their defense. It's insurance, and maybe that's all that Gomez is. He's insurance that he can play in a fourth line role, and if Barbashev or if Ratty or if any of their young forwards really play well, then more than likely Gomez is going to be signed to a contract less than $925,000, and either you waive him or terminate the contract, and there's nothing is lost. So I mean, I think this is just insurance for Hitchcock.
Yeah, but you know what? There's something to be said that's more than insurance. Like, look what the Rangers finally did last year, and they actually left an availability for a spot, and Jesper Fast took that spot. Like, he was probably ready for that a year before, and I've been carpeting him for a while, but there was never a spot available, so there was never that carrot sort of being dangled. Now there is, right? And last year there was for him, and he took that spot, and he never gave it up. And you have to do that now, I think, with youngsters, because if they were in camp and they sort of believe that everything's taken, it's not to say they're not going to try their hardest. They do, but they also don't believe they can make the team, and that's
They're very right. I mean, I've talked to players that if you go to rookies and guys who are coming in, and they know the chances are, they already feel like, especially in the salary cap era, everything's slotted. It doesn't really. I mean, how can they take a player off that they're paying $2 million in a one-way contract? How can you beat out a guy with that? You can't really beat out a player like that.
Yeah, well, you're right, but I seriously, I mean, in the situation we're talking about, I seriously doubt that Scott Gomez is going to be making anywhere close to $1 million. I think he's probably going to be making.
He's not going to make a lot of money, but this could be. I mean, to me, it occurs like what Kevin had talked about last week, that this could be just a courtesy tryout. Brodeur said you can come and play here and play well in a couple preseason games and then get your chance someplace else. It could be that kind of thing. It kind of feels like that to me, like this.
I just find it very coincidental that it happens the same day that they announced the surgery for Berglund. So you know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, if it was just an opportunity, because teams have been announcing PTO contracts with players for a couple weeks now. It's ironic that they announced this with Gomez and then 2 hours later released that Berglund's out for 4 months. So I think there's a little bit of a connection here, but we'll see.
Now here's a story. What I want to talk about today, and I purposely didn't tell you guys about this because I wanted to surprise you with it. Okay, so I've been waiting to do this for a while, especially when Russ was on. It had to be when Russ was on because I learned something, and then there was an article recently written in the Hockey Writers that further, by Mike Moore, a really good article that I'll point to later, that just really kind of solidifies this. I was always under the impression that the Montreal Canadiens, when we were kids, just got the French Canadian players automatically. Like there was this thing that they had the rights to the French Canadian players, and that is not true.
That is true.
It is not true. You ready? And check this out. I always thought that was true. You want to know how they got the players? The NHL used to have this thing called a sponsorship program, and this is before pre-draft days. Okay, the NHL had this sponsorship program. And what happened was Selke, Frank Selke, in 1946 became the GM of the Montreal Canadiens, and he jumped on the sponsorship idea and sponsored like 750 franchise youth hockey programs. Just basically they went to this rink and this rink all throughout French Canada and other parts of Canada too. And the rule was in the NHL that if your team sponsored a rink, that the players that came out of that rink were yours. But it had nothing to do with them being French at all. It just happened to be that he sponsored them throughout the province of Quebec and other places as well. But that's how, that's how this came to be. Another team sponsored youth programs as well, and just they put money into them, and therefore this would be the equivalent of Johnny Hockey or something like that comes up through the skate zone program in South Jersey and becomes the Flyers property because the Flyers put money into that program, and he comes through that system and becomes their property. That's what happened with the French Canadian players. But it is because it's a myth, and I did a lot of research, and then Mike Moore wrote this article too, and he said the same exact thing, that this was a myth. But the sponsorship program was eventually done away with and turned over to the draft. My question is this: is it better that wouldn't it be better if we had NHL teams actually sponsoring youth hockey programs and then getting maybe some sort of rights to those players or like two of the or something or.
Well, I mean, I'd be in favor of it in terms of the Maple Leafs because they would get the province of Ontario, and that's where.
Yes, I mean that. Yeah, I mean, but the youth hockey programs could then put their services up for bid. Like if there's a big youth hockey program, that could be, anybody could sponsor, any team could sponsor, and that teams would have to throw money into youth hockey programs all over the country, in Canada and the U.S. And actually, the better ones could end up doing pretty well from it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think yes. Could there be a benefit? Sure. But I think these days the clubs actually take care of that in a way where, like, anytime you get a new team, like Vegas moves in, they're going to sponsor X amount of teams. They're going to make sure another somewhere around Las Vegas gets built. Look at the Dallas Stars. There never used to be anything around there. You know, now there's a whole youth hockey program there. So I think it does happen anyhow.
Yeah,
but it doesn't that they automatically get the rights to these players. I mean, like this would be the equivalent of Seth Jones, having like the Stars would have first shot at him because he came up through their system, and shouldn't they? I mean, to me, maybe they should. I mean, your first thought is okay, yeah, sure, we should always have the draft. The draft is the draft, but I mean, look at the money the Coyotes put out, and now we have a superstar young player coming out of the Phoenix area. Were the Coyotes, involved with Austin Matthews at all? Did any of the money they put in help Austin Matthews? I don't know specifically what rinks they sponsored, but I do know, that Seth Jones came out of the Dallas Stars system. Other players have come out of the Sharks system, and obviously plenty of Canadian teams. And
there would be a benefit if there was, say, and I'm using the example of an old Stratomatic league that I used to be in, where a team would have a territorial pick. Like, say, you had the Buffalo Sabres, you had the pick of who was on the Sabres, like a rookie, like Tom Barrasso back in the 80s. You would get him, but then you would have a pick in the draft, and it could be any player not on an existing team that was represented in this league of, say, 20 teams. So yeah, you could have, like, say, Arizona get Austin Matthews because he's from Arizona, and that would benefit these teams because they would have a territorial team. But the benefit would be more towards teams that are in hockey areas like Toronto. I mean, you could say, Connor McDavid, there you go, territorial pick.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that doesn't mean that, the Flyers couldn't sponsor a team in Ontario. I mean, that doesn't mean the Flyers couldn't sponsor teams in Ottawa.
Well, sure, but I'm saying, but the thing is that the imbalance here is that the rich teams would have the ability to sponsor more teams. So all it would do is perpetuate the rich getting richer, and the teams that are the budget teams, and like Ottawa is in Canada, but that doesn't mean Ottawa would be able to sponsor a number of teams. They, based on the way Eugene Melnyk spends money, they wouldn't. But Toronto has billions to invest, so they would. So I think it would be an imperfect system.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely an imperfect system, but at the same time, I mean, why couldn't we say, every year, you get to take one of the guys to come through your. I mean, I'm not saying that this would be completely like you would own every player from there, but if there's a star player that's developed through your system. Now, the first draft was in 1963, and only 21 players were selected because a lot of the amateur players were already on teams who had sponsored, who weren't sponsored there because they gradually worked this away. They gradually went away.
I get what you're saying, and I know that the sponsorship thing existed. But if this was the end-all be-all, then how the hell did Emile Francis get John Rattel and Rod Gilbert out of Guelph, which had to be sponsored? And he had to work hard at doing that. He pretty much had to sneak them out. I mean, there's no way the Canadians didn't know about these kids because, you know, in the second year, Rattel had 86 points. In his fourth year, he had 101 points.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here it is. Check this out. There's I'm glad you brought this up. Mike Moore in his story on HockeyWriters.com. It's a really good story. Talks about those two specific players.
Right.
He says the same. You know, with the future Hall of Famers Rod Gilbert and Jean Rattel, they were backwoods Quebecois who were scouted by Yvan Prudhomme, right, of the New York Rangers and signed by New York in the mid '50s. Rattel couldn't speak a word of English. He joined the Biltmore Rangers organization. Was Red Wings during the organization. But basically, there are many examples of French Canadian players who were never Montreal Canadian property under the old sponsorship system. So there were players that somehow, I guess, because these guys weren't playing for club teams, they were more or less, you know, the way that he's implying this article is they were backwoods, you know, Quebecois. So they were in small places or something like that, and that's how they end up.
Right, there were.
Yeah,
there were not, and I've been looking. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I have been looking all over the place. And this article says the same thing, that because the Canadians also own the rights to. They had 750 teams across North America that were part of the Canadians farm system considered.
All I can say is this: if you were in the province of Ontario, the Maple Leafs had the first crack at you, basically. And that's
the Maple Leafs sponsored your team.
The Maple Leafs had the first crack at Bobby Orr in the early '60s when he was 14 years old, and Punch Imlach and the Leafs organization passed on him.
Well, they must have sponsored. I mean, sure, I'm sure the the Maple Leafs were sponsoring teams close to them. That's what would happen, and those teams would probably want to be sponsored by the Maple Leafs. There was definitely a regional thing that developed, but it wasn't specifically regional. It was because the Canadians could just as easily sponsor a team in Ontario and have the rights to those players.
I'm not saying it was a closed shop. I'm saying that
wasn't a law. And weren't you raised thinking that I always believed that this was just a rule that French Canadian players, the Montreal Canadiens had the rights to French Canadian players. That was the rule. I thought
I didn't know. I knew it wasn't a rule. I knew
I thought it was.
I was told that it was like territorial rights, not a rule.
Right.
But this thing, I mean, and I'm going to do more research on it because I heard this a couple weeks ago and I started researching it, and then I read this article and I'm like, that's exactly what I was being told. So that's why it was kind of odd to me that that's the way it went. I mean, we need a real historian. We need like Scoop Cooper to come in or something like that and tell us. Probably he would know. But yeah, I think that that's pretty interesting, and I mean, I just think that youth hockey all around. We've often said, we've had this debate. Okay, the Dallas Stars go in and they build their program incredibly well, and they take all their. So when an expansion team comes in, they pay, I don't know, they're going to pay $500 million to the owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if they also have to pay another $100 million for the hockey programs regionally? What if that is also a requirement of an expansion team, that they have to put X amount of dollars into the local hockey programs, and which is what the Dallas Stars did, which is what the San Jose Sharks did.
Here, I'm going to give you the quote that literally comes out of my Ranger book, the last one, which we used a couple times. And Emile Francis said, the Canadians had so many players, they overlooked Rattel and Gilbert, but the rule was still there that they had too many, and that's how they were able to get out.
Yeah, I mean, what I would describe it as is a right of first refusal.
Right.
That's basically what they had. I mean, I remember, and I don't remember the verbatim what the quote was, but Punch Imlach basically said with Bobby Orr, who they scouted when he was 14, I believe, was that this kid will never make the league. He's too small.
Well, then what I'm wondering is this. I'm wondering if there's an official, like I talked to somebody at the NHL about this, and they told me about this, that Canadians had these 750 teams, and essentially that meant that they owned almost everybody because they were all the best. They were the best ice hockey, franchises in the 20s. I mean, how many ice hockey franchises were there in the 20s, 30s, and 40s across North America? They owned the rights of 750 of them by sponsoring them. I mean, that's got to be that was more, I was told, than the other 5 teams combined. Like that, the other 5 teams had sponsored combined, right? The Canadians had put that much money into these hockey programs, and that, but perhaps this was an unwritten thing, and this was the NHL's way of kind of getting away with saying the French Canadian players go to Montreal. Maybe this was their. I'm not. I'm just throwing that out there, and I'm doing this on the fly, my thought process, but because I've heard from so many people that French Canadian thing did not really exist, but that this sponsorship program exists, and I'm wondering if the French Canadian thing didn't really quote unquote exist because of the sponsorship thing. Does that make sense?
I was going to say because again, with Francis saying that he felt like they overlooked him.
Yeah.
You have to wonder because this was the first time like a team like the Rangers were able to get guys like that.
Right.
The first time, because everybody, any other time they weren't able to get them that way, and so I guess it's possible that they did overlook them, but I think there was an unwritten rule, and I think the Rangers sort of bypassed the unwritten rule. I think that's what it really boils down to. I think Emile can tell us that they were overlooked and they had too many, but I think there was probably more at play there that he didn't tell us.
Yeah, it also
makes this guy on. I'm gonna talk to this Mike Morrison time because he's a Montreal Canadiens historian. He writes.
It also makes Francis look a little more brilliant that he found these nuggets, diamonds in the rough out of the nether regions of Quebec. So. It's like the Maple Leafs. I think Teeter Kennedy was a Montreal Canadian prospect, and they traded for him, and then he ended up being, their greatest Cup winner of all time. So, I mean.
No, these are, it's just an interesting twist that I had heard, and we'll try to get to the bottom of it, exactly what it was. Because, I've talked to people, and Emile Francis, obviously Russ has talked to Emile Francis, and these guys are, know what they're talking about here. And they lived in the era, they were part of that era, they knew what was going on. But this sponsorship thing keeps getting brought up to me, and I had never heard of it until about a month ago, and then suddenly I keep hearing about it.
Yeah, look, I think Emile Francis was very candid with me and was great with everything. Yeah. Do I think he told me everything? No.
Right. No, I don't know. We'll find out. I'm going to try to talk to this Mike Moore guy and talk to him because he's basically a Canadiens historian. Sounds like a guy, similar to what we know with Scoop Cooper with the Flyers, and who really knows all this stuff. Here's my next question. This was tweeted to me, and I have no idea what the answer is to this. So I'm hoping you guys know. Or Kevin would know, maybe he would, or maybe it hasn't been said yet. With the coming, expansion draft that we're going to see 2 years from now, do players with no movement clauses and no trade clauses get exempt from that?
No, I don't think so.
That's what I said, Russ.
I would say I don't think so either, but it's interesting.
Isn't that? Because I think the last time we had an expansion draft, like the no movement and no trade clauses were pretty rare.
Right. No, the movement clause and the no trade clause is applicable to the team that they signed with. That team can't trade that player or can't send them to the American Hockey League. Whereas an expansion draft is a sort of a league-sponsored practice where, I don't think that those contractual restrictions apply. So I would think
so, but at the same time, I don't know, because can a team not expose me? Like if I have a no movement clause, I could sit there and say you're not allowed to expose me to a draft.
Right. So then, that gives the Chicago Blackhawks 2 more spots to protect players who might have interest from Vegas or Quebec because Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews have no move clauses?
No, I think it's more along the lines that they have to protect Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews as 2 other players they protect, and that they're stuck there. It's not like they're going to get 2 extra players to protect. I think it's more along the lines of that. Like, and they brought it up in thoughts of Dion Phaneuf, right? Who's got a no movement clause.
No, he's got a limited no trade.
All right, but then again, a limit. What does all this mean in terms of an expansion draft? That's like.
Right. Does that mean in the September before the expansion draft, he's got to submit a list of 10 teams? That 2 of those 10 teams are Vegas and Quebec.
Right.
That's why I'm saying if I wager, I would say that the no move clause and the no trade clauses are not applicable to expansion drafts.
I'm going to try to find out. I'm going to call the NHL on this one and see today what they say.
Hold on. I think I got the answer. I'm getting it.
Okay, or else might come up with it because I think this is it was a fascinating question, and I can't believe I hadn't thought of this issue because it is such a big issue. But it could become a huge issue, and could guys actually negotiating their contract the guys who are negotiating contracts next year that I am not, that you can't expose me to the entry draft. You know, like that. I guess you could write that in. No movement, no trade, no exposure clause.
A no expansion clause.
No expansion clause. I mean, why not, right? If that is the case, haven't agents already thought about this?
I wish my stomach had a no expansion clause.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, you and me both. I don't know exactly where to go with it. I just think that I would have thought that agent, maybe I need to talk to an agent about this. Or,
Well, I mean, how realistic? I mean,
it's very realistic because
players. There would be teams that would want to get rid of a salary.
Right,
No,
salaries all have no movement clauses on them.
What I was saying is how realistic up until a couple of years ago was another round of expansion. It really wasn't. It really wasn't in the realm of.
I think for the last 3 years, though, or you need to go 3 to 4 years, people have figured that this was going to go to 32 teams. I think that, especially since they went to this format, which is now 2 years. We're 2 years into this, right? We're going to our third year with this format of.
I'm reading the CBA now, and expansion draft is in there.
Okay.
So they did know it's coming, right? I mean.
Right. They knew it was coming. And they had to figure. I mean, because especially when they went to the uneven conferences, it really was apparent that we were going to expand by 2 teams. That's when I realized it had to happen. And that was 3-4 years ago now, actually. So all the contracts that have been negotiated since then, a lot of them have been negotiated. Has this been brought up? I mean,
yeah, but the thing is, and okay, maybe, and I will err on the. I believe no move clause, there are no trade clause, they can still be, claimed in an expansion draft. So if I'm wrong, we'll see when we finally find out. But how many players out there right now have limited no trades? I would say probably about 10 to 15% of the league have limited no trades, which means 10 to 15% of the league can't be picked in the expansion draft because they have this limited exemption.
Right. I mean, it looks to me that's. Yeah, I mean, could he? I don't know. That's a big question. To me, it would almost be like, okay, a no movement clause would be more appropriate than a no trade clause in this situation, but I might be wrong.
Well, yeah, but and that's the thing. Like I said, I think that those particular clauses in those deals were applicable to the teams that signed them to the contract. The league has no ability to or no role in honoring a no movement clause for a particular team.
Right, they don't.
So that's why I'm saying it's like if a team, I mean, maybe it's the point that you made, Ak, the fact that he would become available, or the fact that he'd be listed as an available player would be abrogating the no movement clause to make him.
What I think.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. That's what I would argue. I would argue if I was an agent, I would argue that you can't leave him where he could possibly be moved because he has no movement clause.
But also the thing is the player could say, I'm willing to waive my no movement clause to be in the expansion draft.
But not many players are going to want to go to expansion teams.
Right. But
I mean, perhaps they will, but maybe if they're from Quebec.
Here's the first thing I was able to find, and this is kind of interesting, which kind of to me plays to the argument that possibly no movements aren't going to matter. There's a I don't know what you call it, a codicil. I'm not a lawyer, but here's one of the things that says 13.7 expansion draft team location. Any player forced to move as a result of being claimed in an expansion draft or as a result of a team relocation shall be paid $6,000, and then it talks about a few other things. But like if you're forced, then that doesn't
right. You
have a lot of say so here.
Forced that's a funny word to use.
Yeah, forced means clauses be damned. That's what it means.
That's what it sounds like to me.
And here's $6,000. You're a member of the Las Vegas team. I mean, what does that mean to these players that we're talking about now? I mean, that's just like
I guess it's really made for the younger player.
Yeah.
The first-year player where he needs that money.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're certainly not being asked to be moved. I mean, anyone in an expansion draft is not going to get a say in it, except unless they do, and that's what we don't know, I guess, unless there's no movement or no trade clause.
Well, what will be interesting is to find out what the parameters are of how many games played it will be, for a player to have to be protected. Because, like Kevin was saying in one of the earlier webcasts this week, a player who is a rookie is, who has a certain amount of games played, isn't going to have to be protected. It's going to be players who have a certain amount of, over, say, 200 games in the NHL. Which, in a way, if the funny thing is, Russ, is that might force NHL teams to keep some of their young prospects down in the AHL and not playing in the NHL longer because they don't want to have them exposed to expansion drafts.
That will definitely happen. That's happened over the years. It's happened in baseball. It's happened in every sport. That will definitely occur.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will occur. Well, that's something we'll have to look into. I put out a little, message to some of my agent friends and some people at the NHL to see if I can get an answer on this. But, you can see it. You can see it's definitely going to be an issue. It's going to be their players because it really does change how valuable that and because you had talked about it yesterday, Russ, that this was a real good get out of jail free card for some of these teams if they could get rid of some of these players. Some of these bad contracts, and these expansion teams are going to have to take some big contracts to get to the floor. So there's going to be, a desire on both sides there. Plus the big contract names, even if they're not working out too well in the cities, they're still usually big names, exciting players, or players that people want to see. Dion Phaneuf is still he might not be playing that well, but he's still an important player.
Right, but what I said yesterday was the fact that what some of these expansion teams will do is that they'll claim these players in the expansion draft and then use these players to trade to established teams who are looking for a veteran or two and get future assets. I mean, these teams are going to stink for at least 3 or 4 years. They're going to want to, compile draft picks, do scouting, develop their minor leagues, their prospect base, and probably finish badly in the, and not to say that they purposely will want to finish badly, but they're going to finish badly because their teams are not going to be complete. It's going to be like Tampa and Ottawa were in their early years, and they compiled a large number of number 1 and number 2 picks overall, and that eventually helped them. But it's going to be painful, and they may take those veteran players to flip them other places and get assets for them.
I think that's probably exactly what they'll do. It makes sense to me, that they would do that. So yeah, so we'll see. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, the expansion draft is going to be a blast. Obviously, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And
we'll have to do a webcast for that.
Oh my gosh,
that would make sense actually.
Oh yeah, there's no question there'll be a webcast. I mean, that's a whole thing in and of itself. And we can now. One of the things I do want to do is in the coming weeks here on the HockeyBuzzCast is put together our World Cup of Hockey teams if we were picking them now in all the different categories. And this is something I would like to do. And I actually want to put them on the EA Sports and play them out video-wise. I think it'd be fun. Because it's going to be it's definitely going to be a fun debatable thing. But we're a year away, basically a year from now. Though these teams will be convening, right? Because it starts I think September 20th. Next year?
I thought it was in August.
I think it's in September.
Okay.
It's definitely in September. So it's about a year away, and I would like to play these games, about a year ahead of time, just to see where they would go. And obviously, this year is going to change a lot of players, and this year is going to be one of those years where teams or players are going to be trying out. But it'd be fun to see if we pick a team now, how close we can get to these teams, because especially the under 24 team, I think is easier to pick than most because there's certain obvious players on that list.
Yeah, I know 2 of them.
Yeah. I mean, 2 of them just got drafted this year, right? So, and that team's going to be good. I mean, that team. I mean, who is going to be better, Russ? The under 24 team or the all world team?
I mean, it could be the under 24 team. They won't have that experience, but now, where are they going to play these games? It's going to be in NHL rinks, right?
In Toronto. It's all going to be in Toronto.
Center. All of them are at Air Canada Center.
Right.
Yeah.
So it won't be bigger ice or anything, but look, Austin Matthews can be on that team too. I mean, that's another big cog. I mean, they're gonna what they'll be lacking in experience, they may be able to make up in speed and endurance, and so that chances are they won't be the best team, but they could be one of the best.
Yeah, I think they could. I think they're better than. I mean, they could be better than the rest of the world team. I mean,
how big of a farce is it going to be if the under 24 team wins? If the under 24 team beats the U.S. or beats Team Canada, a combination of U.S. and Canadian players beats one of the.
It's sort of like a mixed, 1980 Miracle on Ice sort of thing. I mean,
right.
That's the closest thing that you could get to that. That's the 21st century version of that.
Yeah, although I think that the under 24 team is going to be way better than that Miracle on Ice team was. I think just because when it all comes down to it, and
yeah, I think that's fair. But again, there'll be the young bucks. They're not totally proven. They're not 10-time All-Star guys.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that this comes down to the argument that you could put another Canadian team into the tournament, and that Canadian team could finish in the top. We've always said it, right? Could finish in the top 4 or 5.
Right.
Or could even beat the other Canadian team. I mean, you're talking about obviously the one Canadian team that's in there. The best team should be better, but the difference between these players is not that great. When you get to the second team, it's still a very good team. They could get a hot goalie, and they could beat the first team. And I think the problem where the under 24 team falls apart is the goaltending. I think that's the issue. I think that, to me.
Well, we think that today, but by next year that may not be the same issue. What if John Gibson gets it together? What if I mean, there's some really good young goalies that when it clicks, what if they're getting like a guy that's got like Carey Price talent, and it finally clicked for the guy, and it's in this tournament. It could happen.
Yeah. I mean, remembering that this is only Canadian and Americans, right? So that plays into it for sure.
It does.
Because if that wasn't the case. Go ahead, Mike.
I was like Connor Hellebuyck, like he was in the World Championship.
Hellebuyck could be a perfect example. He already played in the World Championships. I already think he's middle echelon, but he has a chance to be upper echelon. What if by then he is upper echelon?
Remember, they've got a starting 2 defense, perhaps of Seth Jones and Aaron Ekblad, right? I mean, that's a solid 1-2 punch on D.
Yeah, I mean, Jones.
This team is going to be very good.
They're going to be very good.
So
they're a very hard team to pick right now, and but I think that's what we're going to try to do next week. We're going to have some days where we're going to pick these teams, and then put them together on EA Sports. I really wish I knew what EA was going to do. You have friends at EA Sports. I need to talk to you, Russ, here, because I really need to know what they're going to do with their new game, because I want to know how to make this team together. Because right now, I wonder, for example, if they're going to have international teams in their new game, or they're going to wait till next year with the internet, because their game comes out technically right about the same time as the World Cup of Hockey comes out next year, so they could wait a year.
I'll try and find out the answers to these things and let you know.
Thank you.
All right, but I got to run.
All right, guys, we all got to go. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Talk to you tomorrow.